This is the best moments of the Barbecue Central show in 10 minutes or less. Ever wish you could re-listen to your favorite interview or segment? Do you enjoy hearing older shows for the first time in years? Then the best moments of the Barbecue Central show in 10 minutes or less is just what you need. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the best moments of the Barbecue Central show in 10 minutes or less. Episode 80 coming at you from March 27th back in 2014. First up, cookbook author and grill master for Weber Grills, Jamie Purviance. He's in paying his first visit with Greg. Second segment today, something a little unusual, pulled from an open segment. John Dawson, the original Patio Daddio, calling in, talking a little Carabuta pork. Let's get right to it. Here is Greg and Jamie Purviance from March 27, 2014.
Greg at thebbqcentralshow.com. My first guest tonight, a prolific book writer, one of the biggest and best grill companies in the world. His most recent book is Weber's Big Book of Burgers, as I am sure many of you partook in these over the weekend. Let's go ahead and race over to the hotline and welcome first-time guest to the show. It's my pleasure to welcome Jamie Purviance in. Jamie, how are you, buddy?
Hey, Greg, I'm great. Happy to be with you.
Great.
How you doing?
Appreciate you making the time, and I'm doing absolutely fabulous. Appreciate you asking.
Sure.
The new book, Big Book of Burgers, last year I noticed there was a rush of burger books to hit the market. In 2014, however, you seem to be kind of the only big name out there taking on the subject. This year, as a prospective buyer or reader, what can one expect from this effort?
Well, my hope going in, and I think that we've achieved it, is to create the most comprehensive burger book out there that really captures the classics, everything that you want in a burger book traditionally, and then kind of surprises people and delights them with some interesting variations. We're in sort of this burger renaissance now where we're rethinking what a burger is and what it could be. And so there are just a lot of interesting variations using all kinds of different meats, definitely, turkey and chicken and seafood and bison and lamb, and a lot of vegetarian burgers as well. And then we've got a lot of side dishes, a lot of sausage and hot dogs, because it all kind of goes together with this sort of classic backyard scenario. So it's just a really comprehensive look at where we are with burgers today. And, in typical Weber style, every recipe has a photo. I think they're gorgeous. I'm a little biased, but I think the food's great. It's got a fun design. Just a great book.
So when we talk about burgers, and I think when you say burgers, at least to my audience, which are, the big fat barbecue and griller guys like we are, we think beef burgers. So everybody has an opinion or a take or their suggestions on how to really start out with the necessities of making a good burger. In your opinion, what do you think that you need to have in order to start out making a good burger?
Fat.
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, it really is important. You need really juicy meat to begin with. Fatty and also not compressed. I think that's one mistake that people make is they get this stuff. Usually it's in a little styrofoam tray and it's packed in there like sausage meat.
Yep.
And that stuff is never going to be loose and tender like a burger should be. So, freshly ground if you can, but if you can't get it freshly ground, at least try to find the package that looks like, you can actually see some texture in it. You can see a little bit of the grain of the meat, so to speak. And then, you need some technique, obviously. And there's a lot of, focus on that in the book. But basically, a couple mistakes that people typically make is that they make the burgers too fat, for one thing. I like them about 3/4 of an inch thick, because I like that sort of ideal contrast between a nice crust on the outside, a little char, a little, caramelized meat, and then this really juicy stuff in the center. And if the thing is too fat, it tends to burn on the outside. And if it's too thin, you never really get a decent crust on it. You need some pretty blazing hot heat. I like a good medium hot fire. And I'm a big proponent of keeping the lid down. That's probably a controversial topic, but I think it makes a huge difference. It keeps the grate hotter. It traps the smoke, which is really important. And it cooks the thing a little bit faster, too. So it tends to be juicier in the end. You're always losing juice through the cooking, through the grilling. So if you can kind of get it on and off a little faster, it's probably going to be juicier in the end. So those are just some basics, but there's a lot more in the book.
So, you broached the subject of lid up, lid down. Dare I take us down the path of charcoal or propane?
Sure, we can go there. Well, not surprisingly, I like both, and I really mean that honestly. And I'm lucky because I have both, so I can kind of pick my grill depending upon my burger or whatever else, whether it's a steak or a chicken breast or, the recipe. Basically the charcoal has more flavor. It has more smokiness to it. So if you want that in your food, then absolutely, that's the way to go. Then there's the whole other issue of just the experience of working the charcoal, which can be enormously gratifying. I'm sure a lot of the guys listening can relate to that, and I can too. I wrote a whole book on charcoal grilling, and it's probably my favorite to date because it's just such a gratifying experience. But having said all that, there are times when you might not want a whole lot of smokiness in your food, and you might want, the convenience of just firing up that gas grill. So personally, I'm glad there are both, and I don't see why we have to have one or the other.
Are you a divot in the middle pusher guy, or is that kind of a myth?
It works pretty well. I'm a little tired of it as a technique. I mean, it seems like every article that comes out on burgers shows this thing, and I've been seeing it now for 15 years or so. So to me, it's sort of old news, but it helps a little bit, particularly if the meat is sort of tight, and it tends to create that sort of meatball effect where you get this dome. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is the meat itself and your technique on the grill. Flipping the burger only once, that's another big rule for me. If you're flipping it more than that, you're asking for trouble. It's probably going to stick and fall apart. You're probably going to lose a lot more juice that way. You're not going to get as good a char on the outside. So I'm a one flip kind of guy.
In regards to that one flipping, and obviously I think people, especially the novices or the beginners, get into that. They put the meat down on the grill, and then all of a sudden they're after it 3 seconds later with a spatula, moving it around, breaking it apart, as you said. But I think there's kind of that innate concern on their part that if they don't flip it 15 times, that it's not going to cook through all the way, or this is the only way to get it to cook evenly. In regards to that, do you shoot for internal temperatures? Are you cook by time, cook by feel? How do you tell when it's done?
I cook mostly by time. Yeah, I mean, I've done this so long now that I can kind of just have an internal clock, but you can use your watch too. I mean, basically a 3/4 inch burger is going to take about 8 or 9 minutes. So you turn it after 4, and you can just look at it too. You can tell, and you can touch it. It'll obviously firms up a little bit as it cooks. So I do all that. But if people are new to it, as I once was, I mean, there was a day when I was using a thermometer on a burger, and that's fine to do. Shoot for about 160, particularly if you're not quite sure where the meat came from. But, the irony is those guys who talk about having to flip it again and again because they're not sure it's going to cook through. That if they're flipping it again and again, the lid necessarily has to be open, right?
Right.
So that's slowing down the whole process. So if they would just leave it alone, close the lid and let it go, it would be cooking faster, and it would be better.
One last question here before I let you go. And again, I know we're broaching all sorts of controversial burger topics. I mean, we'll probably get shut down by the internets here in a second. I know people that will specifically go to a restaurant or maybe it's their own house, and they will not take a burger over medium rare. I mean, we're not talking about steak here, but we're talking about ground meat. Do you have a aversion to those people that like the medium rare burger? Do you think that's like an unsafe thing?
No, at a good restaurant where you know exactly where the meat came from and maybe they've ground it themselves, I mean, they're grinding up, ribeye back there, or a brisket or something else. And so, in a restaurant, absolutely have it any way you like. For the cookbooks, I have to call for 160 because who knows where somebody's going to get it. They may go down to the 7-Eleven and pick up something that's been in there for 3 weeks. So I got to play it safe. But sure, you can have a medium rare burger in a restaurant. Absolutely.
If somebody were to say, Jamie, I'm cooking burgers tonight, what's your favorite go-to burger? I'm looking at a ginger scallion burger here, which is sort of a non-traditional burger. And again, that's sort of the emphasis of this book. It's actually a mixture of beef and pork with ginger and scallions, obviously, and a lot of other Asian ingredients, sesame and soy, and it's actually topped with a sesame spinach, which probably sounds kind of weird to some people out there, but this is sort of the way burgers are going. I don't think anyone is abandoning the classics, and I have the bacon cheeseburger with the guacamole and all that stuff, and it's fabulous. But I think the future of burgers, lies in this world of things like ginger scallion with sesame spinach. It's really, really good. I had it just a couple nights ago.
To put in your request for a future show, please contact John Solberg via email at johnjon@bbqcentralshow.com.
That Big Burger book is still available over at Amazon. It is a good book. There is no doubt about it. Hey, before we jump into the second segment today, are you following the Big Barbecue Central Show on social media? Much appreciated and very easy to do. Also, if you could subscribe to the Barbecue Central Show via podcast, that's also much appreciated. Find them on your favorite social media platform. All right, let's jump into the second segment. Here is Greg with John Dawson, the original Patio Daddio.
Now, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
All right, welcome back. Greg at the BBQCentralShow.com. Oh. I don't know how to make it any bigger than that. I don't know. Trying to mess around with my picture. Can't do it. John Dawson writing in, Ramps, I am watching Barbecue Pit Wars on Destination America, and I can't help but think that barbecue is the only American sport, air quotes, that occasionally requires English subtitles. That's right, John. I know what you're talking about. All right, let's race to the hotlines and calling in from the great nation of Boise, Idaho. It is Patio Daddio himself, John Dawson. John, what's up, buddy?
What is up, Mr. Rempe?
Hey, well, I was just telling everybody about your witty remarks on Barbecue Pit War TV.
Oh, the Stumpmeister. He always kills me, man.
Well, I think you have what people would call an enigma because he is quite the pit builder.
Yeah, he is indeed, but the dude, I have to actually read the subtitles to know what the boy is saying most of the time. So.
Yeah, I hear you. So what is happening over in the Boise?
Not a whole lot. I didn't have anything specific to talk about. I just wanted to call you up and thank you for all you do for barbecue, and I listen every week, and I don't think you probably get enough appreciation for what you do. So I just thought I'd take the opportunity to call in and do just that.
Thank you, John. Appreciate you. Now, look, let me ask you a quick question because I know from time to time you're getting after that pit barrel cooker, and I have one of those. I get, let's say, 4 or 5 emails a week on that particular one, on the pit barrel cooker. And look, for people to ask me, it's one thing, but you're obviously a venerable food blogger, as it were. You've been in and outside of that thing for a number of times. I mean, in your opinion, when you would compare it to maybe one you could make yourself or something comparable in the charcoal cooker range, I mean, how good of a piece of equipment is that?
Well, I'll just give it to you straight. I have a WSM, an 18.5 inch on my patio. I have a what I call Black Betty, old school smoking pit Brinkman before they cheaped out and went to China. I have two custom UDSs that I used for competition back in, I think, starting in '08. And let me just put it this way. The only pit I have lit this entire year and probably half of last year is the pit barrel.
Really?
Really.
Wow.
And that includes competition where I took my very first grand championship. I cooked on 2 pit barrels and that was it. And so I'm definitely a fanboy, and not because I'm friends with Noah, but just because the thing, I mean, every time I go to cook, yesterday I cooked some 3-inch monster Carabuta pork chops for Memorial Day, and there was no question of what I was going to put them on. So it's just hands down my go-to cooker, and only because it performs, not because I'm getting any money from it. This is what I cook on. So.
John, you broach a great subject that I want to hit on here, and this is this Carabuta pork. So look, was it 3 years ago or 4 years ago or whatever the season 1 of Barbecue Pitmasters that everybody trashed until season 2 came out, and then it was the gold standard of Barbecue Pitmaster TV. But Myron kept talking about the Wagyu brisket, and and more I'm hearing Carabuta pork. I don't think it's really hit the fevered pitch as the brisket portion or the brisket counterpart did, but as somebody who has a pretty seasoned palate and you've worked with a lot of meats, why would I want to think about getting a Carabuta pork? What separates it from pork chops?
Well, I'll give you just at the risk of being a little meathead-ish on you, I'll give you a little bit of kind of history of how we got to where we are. Pork used to be the way Carabuta is now. And then the other white meat thing came out where pork was trying to compete with chicken. So they essentially bred all the fat out of the hogs and made them be white meat, to the point where a pork tenderloin literally has just about as much, if not less, fat than a chicken breast does. So everything I believe has come full circle to where now people want to eat pork the way it used to be back in the day when I ate it as a kid in Ohio. And Carabuta is just that. It tastes like pork used to taste. So I realize some people won't have a frame of reference to know what that is, but that's kind of how it was sold to me. I've recently partnered, in the interest of full disclosure, with Snake River Farms. So they've given me some Carabuta. So it's a little pricier. Well, actually, it can be a lot pricier, but it's old school pork. It's the best way I can describe it.
In terms of like flavor, is it just more of a richness? Is it sweeter? Like what are just some of the basic profiles that jump off to you when you put that in your mouth versus the standard other white meat stuff?
It is richer. That would be the first thing that you would notice, and that is because it has more marbling in it. And it's just here's a tip. Anybody who's buying pork, when you're in there looking at the meat case, I don't care if it's Carabuta or just grocery store pork, whatever it is, the darker the meat, the darker red, the better it is. Pink pork is not good, not your friend. Red pork is your friend. So Carabuta is, imagine the difference between white meat chicken and dark meat chicken. And that is about the best way I can kind of put the rubber on the road, is say that Carabuta pork is almost all of that dark meat that you get like around the bone. It's just richer. It's just juicier. It's, as you would say, more succulent.
Ooh, succulent, yeah. Do you have to treat it any different on the cooking side of things, or is it the same no matter what?
I don't treat it any different. I haven't made any, scientific experiments to see if it cooks faster or hotter or slower or whatever, but I just treat it like pork. And, like, for example, those 3-inch chops that I cut from a prime rib of pork, which may sound kind of odd. It's 7 pounds. It's got about 7 bones in it, and I cut them double thick, double 2 bones per chop, and they cooked on the pit barrel on the grate. I didn't hang them in about 45 minutes. So, It's just outstanding. So it's one of those things you don't know until you try it, but I will warn people that once you try it, you'll be spoiled. It's kind of like going to Wagyu beef versus grocery store beef. It's the same kind of deal as you alluded to earlier.
What are you looking at, like I'm sure you don't have like what regular pork per pound costs versus what the Snake River Farm stuff, but I mean, percentage wise, like how much more would you think you would be paying for the good stuff versus the run of the mill?
That's a good question. I don't know. I can tell you, and don't quote me on this. Someone will have to check their site. Go to snakeriverfarms.com or whatever it is. And I believe that these 7-pound Carabuta prime rib of pork, I believe they're $75 each.
Wow.
So, so you figure it's going to be, a pound a serving. You're looking at, $10 a serving.
Yeah.
So $10 a pound versus what, $3.99 a pound, maybe $4.90. Meat prices are crazy now, as I'm sure you know, and everybody else knows too. So
yeah.
And there is episode 80 of the best moments of the Barbecue Central Show in 10 minutes or less. If you want to hear the rest of the show, head over to the bbqcentralshow.com. There will be a link in the show notes to take you to the full episode from March 27, 2014. While you're there, please, please, please make sure that you subscribe to the Barbecue Central Show via podcast on whatever podcast catcher that you would like. It's out there everywhere. That is very much appreciated. Just like just like following the Barbecue Central Show on social media. That is very much appreciated. Until next time on the best moments of the Barbecue Central Show in 10 minutes or less, I am your host, John Solberg, and I truly do look forward to talking to you again soon.